Thank you for the kind introduction and thank you for inviting me to talk on this topic. I'm at the National University of Singapore. I think Amit already gave an introduction, so I won't talk much about that. So today's agenda, I'll be giving some background about social enterprises, some of the examples from various parts of the world, explaining some of the challenges and opportunities afforded by digital technology, then going on to digital transformation, covering some of the prior research. I assume this is a research audience, so I guess my talk practically motivates some of the issues, but then goes into the research being done. And then I'll talk about digital maturity, particularly. How can we apply digital maturity models to social enterprises? And finally, I'll end with some future research areas. So what really is the motivation behind this work? There are increasing problems of social exclusion, market failure, and inequality. Social inclusion refers to the process by which individuals or groups are excluded from facilities, benefits that others enjoy. And we've seen that the free market has failed in terms of providing the essential services, products, essential services like water, education, medicines, and so on to those who need it most. And this has really prompted more and more projects and efforts towards social good. And the idea in these efforts is to serve the triple bottom line, not the typical bottom line that we have in private organizations of maximizing profits. So these social enterprises are mainly focusing on a triple bottom line that is combining economic, social, and ecological goals. So the three aspects, the three Ps, people, planet, and also being viable, economically viable as well. So that's then moving on to a definition of social enterprise. This is one of the formal definitions. So there's three common characteristics. One is this idea of uh, explicit social purpose. So social activities are not incidental for a social enterprise. It's not like the CSR effort of a normal corporation. So here, any profit is supposed to be reinvested back into the business and towards the social goals. But at the same time, the income is derived through some commercial activity, typically at least 50% of the income. So this is not merely through donations and grants and so on. So that's what characterizes a social enterprise. And again, this is motivated by the fact that nonprofits and NGOs have found it difficult to only sustain based on donations and handouts. The third aspect is a social or community ownership and accountability. So there's typically a kind of a cooperative structure or a management by voluntary trustees and so on. So this is kind of the formal definition. So what are these so-called social aims and values? So you see a bunch of them here: participation, empowerment, equality, environmental sustainability, fair pay and HR kind of practices, ethical behavior, commitment to communities, and so on. So again, we see more and more of these issues coming to the fore. During the pandemic, we see the issues of inequality, whether it's in terms of healthcare access. We're also seeing climate issues coming to the fore. Although things have improved somewhat in this year, in terms of less transport, less pollution, but we still see a significant amount of those challenges, ecological and environmental challenges as well. So these are some of the aims and values that social enterprises aim to support. So I think these are a couple of the early examples that many people may be familiar with. The Grameen Bank, I think most in India, most audiences would know about this. This was started in uh, I think in 1976 in Bangladesh. Founder Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize. So this is a community development bank, offers microfinance, has, as of 2017, had about 2,600 branches, 9 million borrowers, and about 97% of them in villages in Bangladesh, and again, 97% being women. And the interesting thing is that this effort has spurred similar efforts in 64 other countries around the world. Another major example was Big Issue in 1991. The idea here was to help homeless people earn a living by being vendors of street newspapers. So they buy the newspapers cheap and then sell them at double the price. It started in London, but again, it has now spread to 4 continents. And profits are used for the homeless. So these are some of the early and kind of inspirational examples in some sense. So governments have also started to realize the importance of promoting these kind of social enterprises. So in the US, Barack Obama's administration started the Office of Social Innovation in 2009. It's now called the Social Innovation Fund. UK has had quite a successful social investment strategy. The infographics shows some of the figures in terms of the number of enterprises, the number of employees, and so on, and the kind of efforts that are involved. So Singapore, as I think Harminder talked about, right, always believes in top-down efforts. And the same is the case of social enterprises. So RAISE, which is the Center for Social Enterprise, um, was set up in 2015, and it's a cross-sector collaboration between various ministries and agencies. It offers a bunch of services. So one is a business for good directory. Now this business for good logo is then used by the businesses, and it actually helps these enterprises because the customer is then aware that this is a social enterprise and it has this logo, and whoever customers believe in these values then feel encouraged to patronize these businesses. Um, and the RAISE also runs a number of programs and workshops for social enterprises, for people aspiring to start social enterprises. It also has various funding schemes, grants, and so on. Let me just give 2 examples again of some of the businesses, the enterprises that they have supported. So one is called Adrenaline Group. This is an events management organization, social enterprise. It mainly provides event services for nonprofits and other social enterprises. And it also makes an effort to employ disabled folks, ex-offenders, and so on. So it has a strong social mission. Another example is Bloomback. It's a company. It's a small enterprise that provides flower arrangements and bouquets for nursing homes. Again, the whole idea is to support elderly and people in nursing homes, providing them these kind of services, which really uh, kind of um, spur them and motivate them. So these are two examples. Let me give some examples from India. I guess some of the early examples are Amol, Seva, Lijjat, and Sulabh Service. Um, I was looking through this book as I was preparing for this talk. It's a recent book called Social Entrepreneurship in India. Um, and M.R. Rao did a review of that, and he talked about what are the kind of different business models. So I mentioned new products, services, new methods of production, new markets, new inputs. So there's a range of business models that social enterprises can adopt, and you can see many examples on the left side. And the book also talked about the challenges of scaling up these kind of enterprises. So what are the different avenues or pathways to scaling up, scaling out, scaling deeper, and scaling vertically as well. So I think this is an interesting book for anyone wanting to work in this area in India. The other report that I found quite interesting was by Bertelsmann Stiftung. I think this is a German foundation. They had done a kind of a landscape report on the Indian social enterprises in 2018. So I think if you would like to work in this area, I'd encourage you, the link is provided to look at that report as well. So moving on, I'd like to talk about what are really the challenges. So we clearly understand the motivation for these enterprises. Yet they face significant challenges. On one side, they face these kind of dual objectives. They're trying to do social good, and yet they have to sustain their businesses. They have to pay their employees and run their businesses. So there's and very often when they get funds, they are also, for example, they may get funds from a regular corporation, and then they have uh, the corporation may want publicity and various other kind of objectives which may not necessarily align with the social objectives. And hence there's this conflict between the social and the business objectives. The other kind of challenges are those that we see for small and medium enterprises in general. The lack of resources, the limited information, the challenges in scaling and market development, and also the kind of legitimacy that they have amongst stakeholders. What is their reputation? Are they seen as some kind of sellout because they are also trying to balance this profit versus the social objective? So I've just provided a reference which talks about some of these challenges. So at the same time, there are many opportunities afforded by technology to these enterprises. Deloitte actually did a report on this, and they talked about some of the challenges, but also the opportunity. So they, on one hand, they were talking about the challenges, like the fact that the current youth find kind of empathize with these enterprises and what they represent, because they see that their lives may not be as smooth, or their prosperity, etc., may not be as much as their parents. And they also see that corporate behavior is very questionable, and they are disillusioned by that. Okay. They're seeing that all around them. They're seeing fraud, scams at huge levels by the banks and corporations. And there's also more and more kind of cynicism about the role of government as well, and politicians. So social enterprise is really seen as something that you know um, can do good, um, that the private sector and the public sector may not be able to. That's kind of the perception among the younger generations. So what really can be afforded in by the new tools that we have, AI, new communication technologies. In countries like India, we know that mobile connectivity is huge. It's it's able to access rural areas and so on. So um, there are many opportunities, and that's why we want to look at how social enterprises can transform themselves using computing technology. So I wanted to cover some of the prior research in this area. This area actually spans many areas. So if you plan to do research, it's going to be challenging in terms of your literature review. We already have studies on bottom of the pyramid, corporate social responsibility, ICT for development, frugal IT, and so on. And there are overlaps with social enterprises, right, of all these areas. So one would need to cover and see what has been done in terms of digitization in all these different areas. But I think what's really unique about social enterprises from a research perspective is their unique challenges. So we already talked about some of these, but I'll repeat them again from a research perspective. First is the conflicting commercial and social norms and objectives. That's something unique for social enterprises. Um, which may not apply to the other kind of enterprises. There's also conflicting business and social practices. The third challenge is the stakeholder distrust and skepticism. Due to these dual objectives, people don't necessarily have the same kind of trust that say they have, for example, in NGOs or NPOs. The last one is, I would say, not so unique to social enterprises. The issues of developing knowledge and capabilities, this also applies to small enterprises as well. So there are, so I'm referring to this paper by Gogan and Good. It's included in my list of references. They talk about 3 success factors. One is IT agility, the second is business agility, and the third success factor for social enterprises is a selective application of commercial versus social logics. So how do we have these ideas of IT agility and business agility in regular enterprises? How are we going to apply them to these kind of enterprises which have limited resources? Would they make more use of open source tools, IT platforms, and so on? So, and how could they innovate their business models? I think the book that I mentioned earlier in the Indian context talks about some of these business model innovations from a pragmatic point of view. So, so the work that I was doing comes from my interest in digital transformation. And digital transformation involves both exploitation and exploration. So it includes technology, induced change on many levels of the organization, exploitation meaning basic automation and process digitization to improve existing processes, obtain efficiencies. The exploration part is the innovation. How can you actually transform the business model? How can you scale? How may you go into new areas and so on. Maturity models are a tool that have been applied in various areas. So we know about, I think, audience in India is very familiar with the CMM maturity models, the software engineering maturity models. So the main idea in these models is to convey concrete objectives, promote engagement of management, and easing the handling of uncertainties. So a maturity model can be used by an organization to assess its current state and look at the areas that need to be developed to move to the next state. So there's a bunch of maturity models out there. I've just provided two out here. These are digital maturity models. They talk about various dimensions: strategic, leadership, um, culture, governance, and so on. And then like any maturity model, they talk about the different stages. It could be a 5-stage model or a 7-stage model. And again, these models then help organizations to self-evaluate themselves. If you look at the table on the right, you will see certain questions that organizations can use to self-assess and see what level they are currently at. And then there's usually some information about how to move to the next level, which are the areas to focus on. So there's also industry frameworks out there. The one that I just showed here is a KPMG model on how to deliver social services. And they talk about a few points. First is to leverage the power of mobile apps to deliver services to citizens. And yet they caution that there are some services that are not amenable, more human services that are not necessarily amenable to delivery through this mechanism. They also mention, they mention the potential of analytics. So data collected from various sources can be used to understand the kind of services that citizens need, predict what kind of demand, and even prevent fraudulent use. So again, there are various opportunities for digital technology to transform the delivery of social services. So when we went through the literature, we did not actually find digital maturity models for social enterprises. So the models that I showed earlier, they're mainly for the private sector, and there are a few for the public sector, but again, social enterprises objectives are different. So with that in mind, we looked at how can we develop more specific maturity models for this class of organizations. So we also looked at papers that give us methods for maturity model development, and this is one of the references. There's both the top-down and the bottom-up design. Top-down is when you say conduct Delphi studies, case studies, literature review, and solicit what are those dimensions for social enterprises, right? Bottom-up is when you do it through, whether it's ontologies, algorithms, and so on. And again, it could be data driven. So you have a more theory driven, and then you have the more data driven approaches, and you combine these, and these can then be used to develop your maturity model. So we're actually going through this right now. So I don't really have results to present at this time, but I'd like to draw, again, for those who want to do research in this area, I would like to provide some ideas of some of the theories and perspectives that can be used. So social enterprises have been studied from critical traditions, critical perspectives, using critical theory, institutional theory, looking at how institutional actors shape the behavior of these enterprises, right? Another set, and I've given examples of different studies using these different perspectives. Another set of studies has been looking at it from the viewpoint of social capital. That is, how do these enterprises generate social capital? So borrowing from Putnam and Bordeaux and those kind of work. Another set of studies uses the social entrepreneurship perspective, Schumpeter and others, applied to social enterprises. And an emerging area is the idea of social innovation. And here we have innovation theories, actor network theory, complexity theory to explain social enterprises. So these are some of the perspectives. So I'll kind of round off now. Specific to the kind of work that I'm doing, these are some of the questions. How can social enterprises develop IT knowledge and capabilities? How can they carry out their digital transformation, develop IT agility and leverage for business agility, the whole alignment argument? And how can they selectively apply commercial and social logics? Also, I think we would like to understand what are the impacts and consequences of social enterprise digitization. What benefits does it bring from them and for their other stakeholders? So I also, I think, mentioned some of the areas in slide 11, which bring forth, topics for future research, and as well as some of the perspectives that could be adopted to do research in this area. So at the bottom, I've given examples of a few studies I've done with colleagues and PhD students on SMEs, and I think many of the characteristics apply to SMEs. So we looked at how digital platforms can help SMEs develop various capabilities. So whether it's learning capabilities or marketing capabilities. So I just provided some of the citations in case you're interested to look at that. Again, these are case study based interviews with many SMEs using e-commerce platforms. So here are some of the references that I used, and some cases as well on digital transformation and maturity. These are the references on social enterprises.